Welcome to Devon and Cornwall User Group, Power BI User Group. Today's session is all about Power Automate. Before we get started, I just wanted to draw your attention to the GitHub site where resources from this session and previous sessions will be stored. Also, this weekend we have Data Weekender, which is a free training session. There are 4 tracks, I think, all weekend, all Saturday. That's the first Saturday in November 2023. I'll also be delivering on Tabular Editor, which is an excellent tool for Power BI delivery and development if you are building Power BI reports. I'd also like to draw your attention to the different sessions that we have coming up. Our next session is Greg Deckler, who will be sharing his code and how he writes DAX, which has a human element to it. It's fabulous. I've written a lot of DAX with his strategy for writing DAX. And then without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Christy, who is showing us how you can use Power Automate to pull data from published Power BI data sets. So these are data sets that have been published to the service. So over to Christy. Christy, just to remind people, I've just pressed record, so this session is now being recorded. Completely forgot to say, so I'll stop now.
Good that you remembered.
Yes, definitely.
And one thing that's going to be part of the second session will be around how we can combine different queries to interlink them, meaning how can I extract a list, for example, out of the data set and then leverage it further in running separate queries for each and every item. That's going to be something we are going to look at in the second session. At any time point you have questions, feel free to write them on the chat or stop me. I don't mind if you interrupt me. Now we are going to move away from the slides. And you should be able to see my Power BI desktop file. Now I'm going to quickly show you the data model. It's a very basic one. So the use case that we leveraged it on was people were booking possible client opportunities. So they had to go in a system, they need to track that. The question was, can we send out notifications quickly as a one-on-one Teams chat to the person, showing him, okay, that's the bookings that you have for this week. This was the bookings for last week. They also had the target on it. So that's why they wanted to be proactive and receive those notifications to know where they are. Of course, they could have opened the Power BI report in the Power BI service, but since some of the people are lazy, our CEO wanted to actually leave them without the excuses. So he said, can we actually create those notifications? That's something we are going to start doing today. Now, this is the model. We are going to use the Power BI desktop just to generate some DAX queries so that we don't need to write them manually. And let's start off with the first one. Let me open up the data model because I closed it by mistake.
So just to clarify, what you're going to show us is your manager or the customer requirement was they didn't want to rely on someone going in and opening a Power BI report and looking. They
Correct.
wanted to have it emailed directly to their email.
Correct.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Now, we are going to start off with generation of the DAX queries that we are going to use, because yes, we are going to still use DAX queries even in the Power Automate platform. So first we are going to create a table. And let's open it. Let's select the columns that we would like to use. So we are going to get the booking ID. And yes, okay. Now the booking date. Let's select also the customer and the user ID. Now that's the table that we would first like to extract. We are going to start off with a more simpler one, which is just going and extracting the full-blown table. Now, how we generate the DAX query, that's actually simple. And we are going to make use of the performance analyzer for that. So let me activate it. I'm opening up the performance analyzer. We are going to start the recording. Good. Now it's running. Now I could click on refresh all visuals. That would be an option, but I can also refresh individual visuals. So if I want just to refresh this specific visual, the moment I activated the recording, this icon showed up. And that's something we are going to use. So let me click on it. And you see that it generated me here the actual code. What we are going to do is copy the query. I'm just going to open up a notepad. And now, whoever is a fan of Dex Studio, this code will sound very familiar, but let's also try to understand for the people who see such a code for the first time. We first have the definition, which contains two variables. First, he's summarizing the data. That's what we are doing in the core step. And then we have the top end function. Now that's here because Power BI tables have a default pagination. That's why whenever you have a table and you scroll down, at some point he's going to load more and more rows because he uses the pagination for performance purposes. That is a step that we are not going to use. So this step I will simply remove. And then in the evaluate step, now my variables changed, so I don't have the DSO primary window. Now, what I'm going to do is take the DS0 core from here and put it into the evaluate step back. Now, order by is an optional parameter. In case you want it, you can leave it. We are going to leave it. Now, that is the code that we are going to use to generate first a CSV table. For this, now let's open up Power Automate. Power Automate is getting access through make.powerautomate.com through the newer link. To cover also the licensing part, every user having at least an E1 license will have access to the basic flows. So we don't speak about premium connectors, but we speak about everything related to the Microsoft 365 environment. And let's go to either to my flows if I would like to see the flows that I have or to create. Now let's go to the create one and see the types that we would be able to create. Automated flow means I'm going to provide him a predefined trigger. Now this predefined trigger can mean when a file gets saved on a SharePoint, when an email is received with a certain subject. Those are automatic triggers, something that he's going to scan recurrently, and the moment the trigger gets hit, it's going to run the flow. We have the instant flow. The instant flow means I'm going to access the Power Automate platform and click a button, or the schedule flow. Schedule flow means it will run on a certain recurrence. That's something we are going to do now. So we are going to select the schedule flow. Let's give it a name. And we are going to call it send out data. We are going to tell him when he will start doing that, at what hour he's going to do that. And then we need to define the recurrence. Now, in our case, that was a recurrence that was weekly. So I'm going to select week as a frequency in here. So first I select the week. Of course, I want it weekly, so he's going to repeat it every other week. And then I just need to select the days in which I would like the flow to run. By default, he selected every day of the week, so that's something we are going to change. We are going to deselect Sunday, we are going to deselect Tuesday, Thursday, and again Saturday. I can see which are the days in which he's going to run. So he's going to run Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Okay, now we are going to click on create. That's going to open up the flow that we are now going to build. Now, of course, here it has the trigger.
Hello.
Because that's the first step. Yes, please.
I'm sorry. How are you?
We are good. How about yourself? You have a question?
I want to know what do you do, and I new in the application. My teacher he gave me this link. He told me if I practice with the language, with the English language, you open this link.
So your teacher gave you probably this link because he thought it makes sense for you to participate in a user group. Now this is a user group targeted towards the software called Power BI. What we do here is we meet up recurrently, and one of us, who's either generally a presenter or part of the user group, is going to present something new as a use case so that everybody else can see it and maybe leverage it or learn something new. That's what we are doing now. Today we are showing the integration between Power Automate and Power BI.
You recommend I join another link?
I don't know, that's something you should ask your teacher, to be honest. But sorry for the interruption. Now let's continue. We have the trigger, so that's what Power Automate added by default. Of course, if I created this flow as a recurrent one, I can at any time point go back, remove the trigger and change it. So if I created it as a recurrence, I can still go in at any time point, change it and make it, for example, automatic in a case I would want to. So I have this freedom. I don't need to create the flow from the beginning. Now we have the trigger. We are not going to change it. We just want a new step. And now let's look a bit on what we have. So here first, and that's something important because I learned it the hard way, I'm not going to look at the search icon. I'm first going to look down here, because in Power Automate we have two types of actions. We have the triggers and the actions. Now I have an initial action trigger, sorry. That doesn't mean that at some point in my flow I can't add a second trigger, meaning the flow would run and wait for the second trigger to get hit. That is something possible. In our case, we are looking at the actions, and you can see that that's why we have the blue arrow underneath it right now. By default, he's going to show me the actions right now, unless I change it to triggers. I'm going to search first for Power BI. And the moment I'm searching for it, first, I'm going to see the classification of the actions that we have. So that's Power Automate's classification of the possible actions we can do. If I would want to see all the possible Power BI actions, I can just click on it. You see it changed. Now it drilled down into the Power BI category in Power Automate, and I can see all the possible actions that we have. Now, the actions can pertain to a lot of things, starting from the running the queries like we are going to do today, but are not limited to that. So we have the usage also of when it goes down to Power Automate to streaming datasets. I can use Power Automate to add records to a streaming dataset. I can have all the things around goals, for example, which are called now metrics, but Microsoft was too lazy to change also the Power Automate side. So there's a lot of it. You can search for it if you would want. Now you can also search. So that's something we are going to do now. I'm going to write query. And here we have two options. We can either run the JSON query or the query that's going to use the DAX. That's something we are going to do today because JSON is not my friend and wasn't definitely today. So what do we need to fill in? And you can see that the red marked asterisk means all those fields are mandatory ones. So first, let's open up the workspace drop down and select the workspace. Now, next one, we need to add the dataset selection. Again, the drop down, we only have one, so we are good. And now we need to add the query. Now the query was the one that we generated previously. That's why we started with that so that we have it ready. So I can just go back, copy this one here. And now let's save it and do a test run. I first hit the save button in here, and then I have the testing function. So let's try it out. We don't have any historical triggers because we just created the flow. So we are going first to click on the manual one. Let's run the flow. And now he's going to show us in case we have any errors or not. And we don't, because it actually ran successfully. And we can see this here. In case I would have had any kind of errors, I would have gotten the very nice red bar in here. So let's open up the historical one, because the amazing part is after I do the test run or after I check any kind of run of the flow, I will be able to go in each step and check the input and output of the step. So I can see what we supplied as an input. So we have, again, the workspace that we selected, the data set, and then the actual query. And then I can see what Power BI actually gave us back. And we see the array that he generated. Now, that's an array. And the recommendation now would be, considering that for debugging purposes, I would want to simplify a bit the query that he exported. I again click the edit button, and we are going to add a new step. And now we are going to use a compose action, because I want to take part of the output array and reuse it afterwards. So again, we have the compose step. Now it's asking me for an input. The moment I open it up from the dynamic content in here, I can see the possible dynamic items that I can select. We are interested in the first table rows. It doesn't really have the most suggestive name compared to the description, but what can we do? So let's select it. I'm going to save it because I want to see what happens when I'm going to run it again. Now, when I will go now on the test button, I see that both got active, because now I also have an automatic one, because I'm starting to have historical runs of this flow. If I'm going to select automatically with the recent use trigger, I can see all the possible historical runs that I can select. This can become very useful, especially in scenarios where you have an automatic trigger, because if I would have had an automatic trigger and I would have selected manually, then I would need to perform the trigger, because it wouldn't just start. I would need to actually perform the trigger so that it kicks off. So especially on the automatic triggers, it's very useful to use the historical runs to test it out. It doesn't matter that now I change something. He's going to apply this new logic to that old run. Let's test it out.
So we've got a question from Aaron, if he's got his hands up. Did you want to ask your question, Aaron? I just don't want to lose it if we move on.
Hi everyone. I can ask in the end because I participated in the
Okay, perfect. I didn't want you to think I was ignoring you. Thank you. And an example of did you want to give us an example, Christy, of I'll just mute. There we go. Just mute Aaron. Just you want to give us an example of a trigger that would happen automatically?
The most used one was when we had clients who were not that eager into creating a full data pipeline, so we're working with CSV files. For example, I can have a trigger saying that when the CSV file is saved on a certain location on SharePoint, the flow can trigger out.
Brilliant. Thank you.
And another used one was when we're receiving scheduled reports per email, because they were having a standard subject. We could run it, save the file at a certain location, and then actually kick off the flow.
Thank you.
Good. Now going back, he did the test for us with the compose step. We see that it ran successfully. So now I see here the records that he extracted. We are going to go back because our intent was to generate a CSV file. So now let's go and add a new step and let's search for CSV. And here we have create a CSV table. Now, what we can do is I can just go inside of it, choose the output, and save it. Now, personal recommendation, same as we do, for example, on Power Query. Don't be Christy, rename your steps because it's going to make your life easier. Especially since it's adding the default name. So if I would add now a second create CSV table, of course, it's going to show create CSV table too. So we don't really want that. Renaming the steps is done by clicking here on the more options. And then from here, I can click on rename. That's going to rename my step. Okay, let's try to see how it looks. Now, I'm going to trust that this CSV is going to get generated. So I don't doubt we are going to have an error. We need to have a little bit of faith. So we are moving on and we are adding one more step for me to send the email to myself. So let's go and search for send an email. I'm trying to also show you something that's important. Okay, we don't. But what I wanted to show you is I do have the trigger here. So that's the action that I want to use right now. What I wanted to show you, which sometimes can be confusing, is that you see here two different categories. We have the Office 365 Outlook, and then we have the Outlook.com.
Sorry to interrupt again. We've just had a request to show the compose step again. Do you want to do it at the end or do it now, whenever suits you?
I can do it now.
Okay.
Let me just select, I'm going to select the action so that we don't lose it, and then we are going to fill it in.
Okay. Yeah, if you maybe just sort of explain, that would be brilliant. Thank you.
To explain it, let's park a bit the topic and I'm going to do something. I'm going to go back to the Power BI dataset. I'm going to add a card because it will be much easier to explain the structure that we are using. So let's go and add the measure. Again, I'm going to copy the query, which I'm anyhow going to explain a bit later. And now let me copy this step because the amazing part when building the flows is if I have a step that I'm going to reuse, I can just simply go ahead and just copy this one, go back here, add an action, and then go to my clipboard where I can copy the step. Okay, what did I copy? Definitely not.
You copied the table, not the card.
Good. Now, even though we have a single card over there, it's still going to be extracted as a table, but that's something we want. Let me save it. And we can't save it because I need to provide an email. Let's delete the step. We are going to add it back. Let's test it out so that we can look at the JSON structure with only one record. That's something I forgot to mention. I see the output here, and that's the output that I'm interested on. In case I want to see the full array structure, at every output button that we have this option in here. Now, of course, if the output will be too big, it's going to open it up in a new tab. So it's recommended for you to have an add-on with something like a JSON formatter. In this specific case, it's a small one, so we are going to see it here in the window. And let's take a look. Because we do have the body, that's where we are going to start off. And now, here we have the two categories. the results and the first table rows. Now, we don't really want to get complicated in deep diving into results, then into tables, then into rows, and only then reach our value. We want it to directly go into our records. So that's why, remember the first table rows in here. And if I go now back into edit mode, and I'm going to go to the compose tab, that was the section from the array that we selected. I don't know if this clarified the question, or if not, Hendrik, you can unmute and ask me what wasn't clear. Yes, no, maybe?
We got a thanks. I think it's sort of understanding why to do it in the first table rows, but seeing the JSON array and how it's structured, then that makes it clearer than pulling in the first why it's called first table rows. So that's really helpful. Thank you.
Now, we are back at sending the email. So let's open up again to add an action. Let's look for it. And now I'm going to just type in my name if it would want to cooperate. Okay, then that is a test. And now let's move on. I'm going to need to write something in the body for now because it's a mandatory field, but we are interested in the attachment, and that's the reason for which I, from here, open up the advanced options where I can continue to fill in the details. David, I'm going to talk a bit about the limits in around 3 minutes. So yeah, there are limits that we take into account. I'm going to talk about them while I receive the CSV file. So let's give it a name. And that was our sales bookings. Now, by default, you might be tempted to leave it as such. And for the first run, that's something we are going to do so that we see why this would not be a good option. I'm going now to go to the Generate CSV step and select its output. So what we told him is that is the name, that's the actual content of the file that he's going to send to us. Let's save it and test it out. Now, until I receive it, since I was going to talk about, but David also asked about it, is there a limit of rows? Yes, there is. There is a limit of 100,000 records or 1 million values, meaning total values, number of rows multiplied by number of columns. While there is a limit, there are workarounds that you can apply, because if I run a check and I know I might potentially get more than 100,000 records or 1 million values, what I can do is paginate extraction. So I can run multiple runs and then put them all together. That's something we are going to do in the second session because it's an important topic around how to do the pagination. David, it depends who you're asking. Some people would want 2 million in Excel and not through Power Pivot. Now, let me open up my email and open up the email that I received. Now, what I want you to take a look at is the attachment itself. If my Outlook would knew what file type it is, I would have seen the Excel at least icon in here. Now, it's not showing something and it won't let me open it because what I need to do in the flow is also provide it the extension. So I need to go back here, go into edit mode, and then at every attachment name that I'm going to use, and in general in Power Automate, whenever you create a file, you copy a file, you save a file, you also need to provide Power Automate one way or the other the extension. So here I need to go in and write .csv. Without the extension, he's not going to know what file type it is. Let me save it. And then let me send it out again so that we see how it looks.
And it's things like this that makes all the difference, because when I did it the first time, I forgot to put the file extension on and it left me baffled for a little while.
All of a sudden, I did the extension. Now it shows me it's a text file.
Yeah, Christy did the same as well. Learn from our mistakes.
Now, this is how the CSV file looks. Now, that's the standard structure you are going to see him exporting data. So first you are going to have the table and then the field name. That's why we always have the combination of table name, column name. That's something, however, which we can change. So let me close this one, or actually no, I'll push it to the other screen because we are going to need it a bit. And for the time being, I just pushed the control button and clicked on the back sign in here because I wanted to have also a tab opened, because I need to see also the historical run with the data to take the column names. So this was something that I was tested on. I want to see the exact names which appear in there. Now, why do we need it? Let me open. I'll just copy this one from here. Let's go back to the initial file we had, which was here. And I could either use them from here or I could copy them from here. It doesn't really matter. If I want to be sure, what I can do is I can close this one and go into my Compose tab and see if there is a difference in here. Now, let's go into edit mode because we want to provide some user-friendly names. And the question is, can we actually change the names of the columns that get displayed? And the answer is yes. I can customize the column headers in the actual CSV file. If I'll go back to the step to generate a CSV, I see here that I have show advanced options. So let me click on it. And I see that now I have a new option, which is the column settings. It's automatically set to automatic, so everything that gets supplied, it's going to get displayed. But I can also customize it. I can click on custom. And now he's going to ask me the header, and we are just going to do a very short try. So that is the name that's going to get used from now on. And then I have the value. Now on the value, that's a part where I'm going to start writing a bit of code, because I will write an expression for it. What I needed to do is go into the outputs, and for each and every row, get the value of the respective column. That's why I needed to know the names of the columns. So the structure we are going to use is item, because he's going to go row by row. Then we are going to use a question mark. Now the question mark, it's a so-called safe navigator. If the previous step would result in a null value, my flow would not crash. What the question mark does is, in case we have null results, he's not going to crash out, but he's going to provide us still the null result back as well. Okay, and then what I need to write is what is the field and what is the field name. Now, we had them with double quotes on the output. Power Automate is not a fan of double quotes. We are going to just use single quotes. And let's search for booking and ID. That was our first field. Good. I'm going to press on OK. But before that, let me also zoom in a bit so that you can see it. So item, for the iteration. Okay, then we had the save navigator, and then we actually had the field name that's going to get displayed under the header called booking in here. Let's click on OK. In case I have any major violation in writing the expression, Power Automate would not let me apply it. So I'm a bit confident that I didn't do a mistake, but let's try it out and see what happens. So again, automatically put the recent trigger, and let's run the latest trigger. Funny enough. And yes, the file came up empty. Why is that?
I think there was maybe a syntax error. So I think it was booking ID, and then you had the apostrophe before the square bracket, I think.
Actually, it appears he deleted me the value. I don't have the expression anymore. Oh well.
Yeah, I think what it was the bookings and then the booking ID. That's it.
Let's see. Now we see it here. Let's hope it's not going to go away. Good. Let me receive the email. Let's open it up and bring it also on the screen. So now he actually did what we wanted. He's showing us the header with only the corresponding IDs. So this is also an option through which I can export data from the dataset, use parts of it to run my actual flow, but then don't send the whole columns out to my user. I can reframe the columns that I would actually want my users to see, because I can generate a dataset. And to give you an example, I might generate a dataset which contains the email ID to which I'm going to send out the email. To make my life easier, I have it in the dataset. I can leverage it. So my export is also going to contain the email. When I generate a CSV, it wouldn't make any kind of sense to actually also still include the email address, because I'm only going to use the address to know to whom I'm going to send it to. If I'm sending it to Sue, of course, it's only going to pertain to the data for Sue. So having the column there would be redundant. By using this option to customize the headers, I can minimize and first provide the user-friendly name. So it's not going to show up as the table and the column name. I can just provide the column name. And I can select which columns I would actually like to send out. And I'm going to stop a bit for questions. Do you have any questions?
There are a few, but we've sort of been chatting a little bit in the chat about it. Any questions anyone wants to ask whilst we've stopped? That was a really nice, really thorough explanation. I think people are we've sort of been a few chats and answering questions.
Good. Now let me also go back and add some more fields so that we don't only send those two fields.
I think we're just watching in awe, Christy.
So let's also select the customer from here. And again, I'm doing it like this. Good. Now let's change it up a bit. And then, so we had the customer. So that's something we are going to paste in here so that we can write the expression again. Very good. Copy it. Again, we go to the value field, because that's where we are telling him what value he's going to inherit. To the expression, paste it in. It's the customer column. And then hit on OK. And then we can also take the data. Let me copy this one. I'm going to quickly replace it on the notepad. Good. And that's going to be our date. That's going to be our expression. Now let's save it.
It's silly things. It's like the syntax, isn't it? In that it gives it to you in double speech marks, but in the expression within Expression Builder, it wants it in single, you know, and it's things like that that can really take time to try and work out why is it not working. So yeah.
True, but I think for this one we can't blame the Power Automate platform itself, because that's the structure of the JSON.
I see. I suppose it's the DAX and the JSON.
Now let's save it, and we are going to move our attention towards the second query that we got, which was the single value. Also rename it, and let's go towards it. So if I'm going to go back to remind what we did on this one, this was just a simple card. And we would like in our email to include that 400 number that we see right here. So we copied it, we have it here. Now let me go to the historical run so that I show you how it looks. So first table rows, or let's open up the output so that we see it. That was the value that we wanted. So we wanted first table rows and then the V bookings so that we get the 400 value. Let me also check on time. I still have 10 minutes. And since we only have 10 minutes, I'm going to try and be fast. We are going to use two methods so that we see a different behavior that we are going to face when using the same in a Power Automate. First, I'm going to use a compose step. Now, in the previous compose step, we provided him a full array. That's not something we want. In this specific case, we just want to extract one single value. So we are going to do this by again using the expression. So let me go to the expression tab. And for this, let me copy the code so that I can explain you the structure that we are going to use. So this is it. So when we write the expression, we first get the output. That's the output and the respective step that we are going to use. So that's the output value for the step called get first run count. Sorry. Then let me zoom out. We had the save navigator again, the question mark. Then he's checking how he's going to navigate. If I would have used directly the step to run a query against the data set, that's how I needed to run the navigation. He first would have went into the body, and then he would have went into the first table rows property. Then we have the position index, and Power Automate is the same as Power Query 0 index based. So that's why we chose the 0 here. We just want the value from the first row, and then the actual column that we are going to use. Now, this being said, let's copy this one because we need to update it a bit. Come on, cooperate, please. Oh, we need to update it a bit because the code that we had before was from the actual dry run. So the name has changed. I'm not on get first run count, but I'm actually run single value name. So that's the name that we need to update. Run single value. Good. Next, in here.
Do you need the do you need the apostrophe after run single value?
I forgot to edit, right? I deleted it. Yes, of course we need. Good. So what I did was I deleted by mistake this one, so it would have not run. Then we have the save navigator. Then we have in here the navigation, and we don't need the body anymore. Let's see how it will run as such. Good. Then we have the 0 index, and then I have the field name. Now on the field name, honestly speaking, I am not sure. So I can go to the historical one and just copy the name from here, because that was the value that we wanted. Let's replace it. What I had troubles at the beginning was comprehending the fact that I have the square brackets that are coming from the actual expression. That's a parameter from the expression. Then I had the single quote, and then I had again Power BI extracting me with a square bracket. So that's something I need to pay attention to. Good. Now let's try to apply it. And it won't let me apply it. Let's see why. Something in here he didn't like. So let's copy it from here. Let's bring it back and check the values. So I have the output, that is the name. Okay. Then I have the save navigator. Then I have this one. Now let's check the name, because maybe I did a mistake on the name. So
it's apostrophe. It's not the same apostrophe.
Fernando catched us. But there is still an error here. And what I can actually do is I can bring it here and bring this expression here. So in here, I still have an error inside of the code, because my property is called first table rows, while I used it with first tables rows. This would have worked. So the PowerFX expression would have let me submit it. And let's try it out to see what happens when we are going to get the error message. I'm going to click on OK, save, and then try it out. Now let's check the error message. So of course, most of the Power Automate errors you are going to see are not going to be friendly. So if it thought that Power Query can be mean, this can be even worse. And let's check it out. So this one, I don't foresee any troubles for it. This one, there might be troubles with, because I know I added one more S in there. And then I have the field. Now, I know I'm not going to have any problems on the 0 index. I know I'm not going to have on the bookings. But in case I want to be sure, let me open up step so I can see the name in here. Let's go back, edit a step. And let's fix the error. So here's we were in first table rows. So the S needs to go away. Let's save it and let's try it out. Now it should run. So now we shouldn't have any kind of error messages anymore. Interesting. So we have the yes, true. Yes, this is true because I did the mistake.
We'd put a planned mistake in there, because when we were practicing it, we said it's really good to have a planned mistake.
The planned mistake should have been fixed. Now, what the mistake that I did was I forgot that after I ran the query, I didn't compose the output.
Yeah.
Hence, in order for me to make it run, I would still have needed to access body and then first table rows.
Ah, good.
Let's see if it's going to be working. So body, okay, then slash first table rows. And let's see that we, now I really hope to not have any more mistakes. Good, now let's run it. And it runs successfully.
Yay.
Now, the only step we are going to do was in the send email. We also wanted to use the data. I don't know if I just tested myself now. The amazing part is when I compose the body of the email, and that's either if I want to use the user interface or I can go and use HTML code to write the body of the email. I can hard code the text, so the total bookings, and then I can get the value from the compose tool. That was the step in which we actually got the value. So we can save it, tested it, and after it's going to run, we are just going to be ready for today's part. Let's let it run. And yes, it's working. We still got the file, but we also got the value inside the body of the email.
That's brilliant. So you've been able to, so they don't even have to open it. They can see on their email what the aggregation is, and then they can open it if they want to. So could it be any easier for them? Brilliant.
Yeah,
well done.
In our use case, we considered that they were so lazy that we didn't even send them an email. We just wrote them Teams message, because that they can't say that they received 1,000 messages like they receive on emails, and they would have actually received the Teams notification.
Yeah, that's really nice. So when we did the practice run, Christy had so much more to show us, and we thought we would take all this time. So he's very kindly offered to do a second session for us, where he'll go into much more interesting use cases in how you can use this. Sorry, did you want to? I just wanted to say that was brilliant. The simplicity and just getting the email to come.
If people like the session, they should definitely join the second one, because that's going to be even much more powerful than what we've seen today.
Yeah. Any questions from anyone? You've got lots of love in the chat. Really very helpful. Some great calls.
I hope it was useful.
It was, but I know it took me about a day to work through, and I got a lot more red crosses than you've shown, just where you're just trying to think, why is it not doing this? And then, you know, okay, I need one apostrophe, not two, and then understanding the input and the output, and you know, it just saves so much time to actually see it working from one stage to the other is really, really good. So huge thank you, Christy. And this is English isn't Christy's first language, so to be able to explain technical content like this in your second language, I am in awe, absolute awe at your ability to do so. So a huge thank you. Just if I just take over the screen very quickly, and then I will let everyone finish so that we finish on time. We'll finish the presentation. Let me just grab it back. Share. So just a huge thank you. That's Christy's details. If you're interested, please reach out to him on LinkedIn. And he's also, you know, part of our Devon and Cornwall user group. Oh, Nasir's gone. And on here, next Tuesday the 14th, we've got Greg Deckler, DAX for Humans, 22nd. I'm not sure whether it's going to be in person or not, but Alan Murray is going to be talking about Power BI and Excel. For those of you that are looking for qualifications, Katrina Durrance is going to go through some study tips on how to pass your PL300. Then we've got ChatGPT, and I'm hoping we can get Christy in. I'll talk to him and see if I can twist his arm, because it would be nice to get that second session in before the end of Christmas, if possible, because while it's fresh in our brains. But
you have a promise that we are going to make it happen. So yeah,
we will
just
make it
need to
happen.
tell me the date.
So I reckon maybe the 12th. The in-person events, Ollie or Oliver, are in Saltash in Cornwall. But there just doesn't seem to be the love for the in-person as much as for the virtual. So I should have said that to remind me to record. And that is it. So a huge well done. I'll stop recording and we can hang around for a few minutes. But a huge thank you to Christy. I really enjoyed that. And if you want to stop and unmute yourselves, then please feel free. And I will stop recording now.
Thank you, Christian. I read